Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and Tory scandals are like buses, really, aren't they? There can be none at all for a few weeks, and then three turn up at once. Only on this occasion, I count maybe five. The biggest Tory scandal to hit the news this week was, of course, the betting on the election date by people close to Sunak, and therefore almost certainly in the know that the election was being called for July. In reality, the story broke the week before, but it got really big this week because there were many more people involved than we first thought. YouGov used their new AI tool to once again ask people which are the news stories cutting through to them, and the betting scandal came top of the list. Higher than even the general election, which you would think would be fairly top news right now. So as of yesterday, at least, the betting scandal was the most newsworthy issue, at least as far as YouGov are concerned. Another case of a Tory scandal, which not only reminds us that they seem to have by far and away the biggest pile of misdeeds, which begs the question as to why this party attracts such rogues, but also one which Sunak has allowed to damage himself and his party by siding with the miscreants instead of taking action. I always say, when it comes to a politician or anyone else who does something wrong, doesn't reflect badly on the party if the party takes action when it comes to light. Sunak's culpability was brought into sharp focus when the police arrested and suspended an officer for doing the same thing. Now, Sunak, of course, can't arrest his people, but he can take disciplinary action. Instead, he's just said that he was very angry, like a less serious Marvin the Martian.
Makes me very angry. Very angry indeed.
But there are other scandals as well. Tory's gone a Tory, and despite people trying to be really charitable and saying that the vast majority are fundamentally decent, it's a hell of a coincidence that so much of the really nasty behaviour, which yes isn't 100% from the Tories, is nonetheless mainly from the Conservative Party. So take Johnny Mercer, for example, a veteran and up against another veteran in his own constituency. Locally, he's been trying to claim that his opponent is a Walter Mitty, someone embellishing his military service, particularly active service, because he wouldn't answer a few questions about them. Turns out his Labour opponent, Fred Thomas, is legally unable to because he's been part of Special Forces operations. Now, I've had a dim view of Mercer for some time. He's vain and self-serving. But many people thought that he at least had genuine regard for veterans. You know, that he wanted them treated with respect. This despite Mercer's obvious failings as Veterans Minister, but, you know, maybe that's down to incompetence and the fact that the rest of his party aren't as bothered as he is, right? But with this latest stunt, taking advantage of his opponent's legal ban on talking about much of his military service, Mercer has lost a lot of people who'd been sticking up for him in the past. In fact, he may actually find himself in court at some point, because it is illegal to spread false accusations about your opponents during an election campaign. And despite being called out, Mercer continues to just double down. Double down. It's like Tories these days just don't know when they're backing themselves into a corner. You would think a veteran of Afghanistan would be aware of such things, wouldn't you? But regardless of consequences, just highlights how Tories behave when they're trapped. Are there boundaries that they will observe? Do they think, look, there comes a point where it's better to lose gracefully in a fair contest than to lie and cheat your way to an undeserved win, just so you and your wife, also paid from the public purse, can maintain their seat on the gravy train? On the evidence here, not in Mercer's case. So let's look at the next one. This one involves another cabinet minister, but a full Secretary of State this time. Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, she published a letter regarding the junior doctor strikes in which she made it clear, really clear, head of the letter, she was writing in her capacity as a member of the government. So it's like, good, okay, you're making that clear, great. However, in the letter, she specifically talks about the Conservative Party and its policy. Now, there's supposed to be a clear separation between party and government business at any time. It is sometimes tricky, but it's important. But it's absolutely vital not to merge the two during a general election campaign. You do not use your position in government for electioneering purposes. Now, not for the first time, a Conservative minister has failed to see the difference between their party and the government. It's their born to rule mentality. But on this occasion, also drags the civil service into what could consider to be electioneering. And in a similar blurring of the lines here between roles, Brendan Clark Smith was also caught having sent thousands of letters talking about Conservative policy to his constituents after the election was called. No problem, you can do that. He was using party funds, of course, yes. Oh no, apparently not. The letters were paid for by the taxpayer, printed whilst he was still an MP. So it's now worth asking how the cost of this has been accounted for, because it needs to count as part of his campaign spending limits. But is he trying to pull a fast one here? Could be legally dodgy for him. And the letters also describe himself as the MP. That's not allowed. To avoid having an unfair advantage, you're not allowed to make anything of being an MP in election campaign literature. For most of the campaign, you're not an MP anyway. There are no MPs once Parliament's dissolved. But the letters were printed technically while it was still in session, but that doesn't change the rules. The election had been called. He's now been referred to the police and the House of Commons authorities, so he might find himself in a bit of legal hot water, along with Johnny Mercer at some point. And then finally, I could add in Chris Philp. Now, being clear, this is a potential scandal for the future, rather than right now. Philp has not actually been accused of any particular wrongdoing other than making an arse of interviews this campaign, but his wife has been referred to the CPS on charges of corporate espionage. Now, I'm not one to push guilt by association, and it's possible, of course, she will be found not guilty in due course. This is charges brought, not a conviction secured. But it could still end up reflecting on Philp if she is convicted, and the policing minister, who said there should be absolutely zero tolerance for people who commit crimes, has to consider how his inflexible words work when someone close to you transgresses. And if there is a conviction, this would be a major crime. So they really just can't help themselves. Back in 1997, we had this Tory sleaze. Only it's way worse now. It's actually really weird. We had all the talk was of Tory sleaze in 1996, 1997. Now there's hardly any mention of it, and yet it's almost like it's too big. I couldn't believe it when over the past few years the Tories dealing with their latest scandal would just talk about it blowing over. I don't worry, it'll blow over. And most of them do, of course, given time. They were quite wrong to suppose that Partygate would blow over. That was never blown over. But the rest absolutely could. And a few of them have, really. But what they kept failing to notice is that there's always another scandal or five in the pipeline. It's what comes of being in a party which positively encourages selfish behaviour and a lack of regard for the rules. I suppose the silver lining for them is that most of these scandals have passed under the radar. They're not really in the mainstream media, although some of them may be hitting home locally. The downside is that one of them flew so clearly in the radar that it's triggered a full nuclear warning, and the public are being treated to another display of selfish behaviour by the Tories. 12 days before the election. And it is the Tories, this isn't a few individuals, because the wider party hasn't done anything to make it clear the behaviour is not acceptable. But there we are, those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. Also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.